residential tech talk, lighting specialist to arc residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, we welcome two guests to discuss lighting fixture specification and installation opportunities for the custom integration channel. Joining us from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is Charlie Derk, Vice President of Strategy for Building Control Systems at Legrand. And joining us from San Diego, California is Mike Libman, the National Sales Director at DMF Lighting. Both of today's guests are fully immersed in the lighting fixtures and lighting control categories as they specifically relate to the CI channel. Today, we will talk more about this developing opportunity for integrators and dig a little deeper into the differences in lighting fixture styles, color temperatures, and control options. Charlie Derk and Mike Libman, thanks for joining us today to share your lighting technology insights.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, Mike, you and I got to hang out last fall in person. We also saw each other just last month at Lightapalooza, but last fall, you and your team hosted some of the press at your Carson, California headquarters. For me, personally, that went a long way in increasing my comfort with the category, which is still a bit less familiar than the traditional AV lighting and shades control and networking technology that I've been reporting on for many years now. But now you've been with DMF Lighting for 7.5 years. So I noticed that you'd also, prior to that, been in roles in more like IT networking technology companies. Looking back, what was it that attracted you to move to DMF? And what have you liked so far about working with the residential lighting category and for the respected lighting fixtures brand that is DMF?
Yeah, so I came up from the startup kind of technology world. I was living in the Bay Area at the time. Moved back to San Diego to start my family and had beautiful twin girls. But I had some friends that were in the lighting industry. They said I should really connect with DMF and Michael Danish specifically. Young leadership, second generation ownership of a really strong brand. But he really came in with this product first mindset and really the openness to kind of disrupt some of the traditional paths to market that you see in the lighting fixture industry, which was great. We like to kind of come in and bring new things and try to be at the tip of the spear. So it's been great to see DMF kind of progress over the time that I've been there. Originally, I was working on the commercial side and working with a lot of larger commercial type projects. And then 5.5 years ago, we really saw a huge opportunity where the luxury residential market was underserved from a quality of lighting perspective. We go into 10, 20, $30 million homes that have low quality lighting, not to mention, homes that are lower than that in price point. And we wanted to be able to bring something to the table that aligned with the fit and finish of the homes. And so in kind of taking a step back and looking at what integrators bring to the table and being able to educate their clients on why lighting is important in the first place, pairing that with their strength in lighting control and shades, we think that the integrators are poised to really own the lighting experience in the luxury residential market. And so for the last 5.5 years, we've dedicated a lot of resources from engineering to sales and marketing to do our best to support the channel and support our integrator partners. And it's been a great bet because this is the fastest growing part of our business. We love working with integrators. We're partnered with the right people, and we seem to be on a great trajectory as a whole as an industry. As you mentioned, Lightapalooza had 3 times as many people as it did last year in its inaugural year. So we're excited to see that momentum continue to build.
Well, we'll talk more about that opportunity for sure. I'll circle back to you, but so Charlie doesn't get bored here. I wanted to introduce him as well. And Charlie, your career as it relates to lighting is practically a who's who in the industry, from Lutron in your early days to working with Tom Doherty's lighting control company, to running Crestron's shading solutions business, and then the past 5 years at Legrand with Vantage controls, you must have gained a pretty well-rounded perspective on the evolution of home lighting and the shades category too. You're obviously a bit biased toward the CI channel with your experience, but why do you think it's important for custom integrators to expand their expertise into lighting fixtures?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and looking at the last 25 years, of my career, focusing on lighting and shading control. I mean, this just seems like it's so natural. And throughout my career, I've played a number of different roles. One of them was doing some training. And the thing that I would always tell the integrators that would come to the training is that everybody can sit down and figure out how much it costs to acquire a new customer. And, it's different for everybody, but it's always easier to sell more stuff to the customers that you already have than to go out and acquire that new customer. So, because lighting is so tightly coupled with lighting controls and shading, it just seems natural. And back in the day when it was just, forward or reverse phase dimming, it was a little bit different, but everything is getting much more complicated, much more connected. So it just seems like a natural fit, for the integrator community, because they're used to taking, complex products and making it easy for their end users.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things that we kind of skip over sometimes when we're talking about this opportunity, and it's probably clear to most folks in the industry, but the reason why we're even talking about fixtures is because that switch from incandescent to there's steps in between, but now LED, and that it doesn't always look as good as you'd want it to look in a home, especially a high-end home. The quality of light from maybe inferior LED fixtures, it's just going to look very artificial and harsh, I guess. And it's not necessarily always working with the dimming technologies the way it used to with incandescent. So, Charlie, maybe touch on that just as the origin for why we need to think about fixtures in this way.
I mean, I think the transition went from, like you said, incandescent to LED, but the LED technology, if you go back 5 years ago, at least in residential, was just standard forward phase dimming. What we're calling it now is digital lighting, right? So it's not just turning it on and off and dimming it. It's potentially controlling the color temperature as well. So it makes it a little bit more complicated, and there's a bunch of different technologies that are in the market today, to be able to control these types of fixtures. So, kind of, along the same lines of, integrators kind of taking these complex things and making it simple. It's really figuring out what the best options are for the project, and marrying up the fixtures and the control technology.
Now, when we look at integrators getting involved, Mike, what would you first want to see from a potential dealer for DMF Lighting who has never done any fixture sales? What do you think their most basic knowledge level needs to be? What sort of training should they start with? I know I've said this before in the podcast, and I've heard it from other experts that there's a good place to start, and that's usually outdoor installation, because you can kind of do some work there and not get too carried away with getting into ceilings and that sort of thing. But what would you recommend a first-time dealer learn before they start specifying any fixtures with you?
Yeah. So when we entered the space about 5.5 years ago, barely anyone was doing fixtures. So a lot of the folks that are really successful now, not only with us, but with other folks that are providing fixtures, they've really started from scratch. So our initial path into the channel was through buying groups. So Tom Doherty, HTSA, approached us early on to enter and partner with them. We've since partnered with ProSource as well. And both of them have done a phenomenal job in putting together a curriculum to really educate dealers on lighting, not only from a specification perspective, but also the business case, why they should be doing it, how do you execute it successfully. I think that one of the things that is maybe a bit unique about DMF and why we've had success in the space is we do have the ability to do retrofit as part of our offering. Retrofit is really straightforward from a labor perspective. You're not waiting multiple years for a new construction build to see revenue, which has allowed dealers to kind of like accelerate their ramp. And it's a great proving ground where if you get familiar with retrofit, you can translate that into more complex projects and ultimately new construction projects as well. Now, I think early on, a lot of the discussion was we need to get you to the point where you're able to do lighting design in-house to be really successful in the category, which I don't think is necessary. I think that should absolutely be the end goal. If you want to do complex projects, you need to be able to execute them and work with your other trade partners and make sure that the experience is what the client expects. But that said, there are a number of steps in between, and there's now a lot of infrastructure around the industry. Folks like David Warfel and Light Can Help You and other organizations that have come about to be outsourced design resources as well. So the good news is there's a lot of supporting organizations, whether that's buying groups or manufacturers or design firms that are here to help dealers be successful. And really the key is to get started, figure out who in your organization is going to be a champion, and then collaborating and connecting with the right folks to be able to execute projects well.
Yeah. And, my intention is not to turn this into a commercial for either one of your companies, but I do want to just stop on the retrofit thing for a minute. I did get to see that in person, and when we did our tour of your headquarters, and it's as simple as just screwing in a fixture into I guess a lighting. What you call it? Don't call it a bulb anymore. What do you call it?
It's a lighting module or a luminaire.
Module.
Yeah.
So you're just screwing that into an existing traditional housing there in a ceiling, so you don't have to take anything out. Am I correct about that?
Yeah. Well, you have to take. You don't need electrical work for most applications. So even without a C10 electrical license, you can go in and swap out a fixture. But it's a great opportunity that you can leverage existing clients. So I had a great dealer in the Southern California market call me this week actually and said, "Thank you very much. I got called in to bring in a Sonos amp for a client, and we weren't going to make very much money off that, but we had a discussion about lighting, and that turned into a $25,000 retrofit project."
Wow.
So it's significant revenue, and it's immediate revenue, and it's easy to execute. And again, that's kind of the entry point where you can continue to do those over time, but it's a great way to kind of get your foot in the door in the category, but ultimately driving towards a new construction. And I do think that bringing in and leading with design is the way that you really become successful in the fixture category as a whole. But there's different ways that kind of stepping stones to get to that point.
And Charlie, before we started recording, you mentioned something that I had heard somebody else mention at Lightapalooza, and that when the various different categories were started in the CI channel, lighting control first, and then shades installation, they were both kind of looked at as like not our space, not our categories initially. Can you relate that story and your specific experience because of the companies you've worked with?
Sure.
And how that sort of relates to lighting fixtures.
Yeah, I think it's very similar, and we're kind of seeing the same, adoption rate where, in the lighting control industry in the 90s, it wasn't adopted, quickly. That was considered that was the electrician's responsibility to put in the lighting control system. And over time that's changed, and it's pretty common that the AV integrator today is supplying the lighting control system. And then in the early 2000s, shading, automated shading came, and that was always the interior designer's role. They provide the automated shading, and it took years, until that was widely adopted. And we're seeing the same thing today. I think there's been integrators that have been doing lighting for a long time. You had mentioned Tom, and Tom and I were doing lighting back in 2006. But, my gosh, we were at Lightapalooza a couple of weeks ago, and it was just amazing the number of people that were there to learn. So I see the same thing happening now where, lighting has always been the responsibility of the electrician to provide, but little by little, things are getting, we're moving toward digital lighting control, and like I said, that's kind of perfect for the AV integration community. So I think it's starting out slow, but it's gaining momentum. And I think, another 2 or 3 years and everybody's going to be offering fixtures just like they're offering lighting control and shading that they weren't, maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, after the break, we will continue our conversation with Charlie Derk and Mike Libman. Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from Elan, Speakercraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Welcome back. We're talking with Charlie Derk, Vice President of Strategy for Building Control Systems at Legrand, and Mike Libman, the National Sales Director at DMF Lighting. We were just talking about the role of the electrician traditionally in lighting fixture installation. And I think one of the things that, even though I've heard it a lot and it's sort of sunk in as far as not being a problem, I think people still kind of bring that up. They're like, well, I'm going to make the electrician mad on the jobs that I'm doing. But what we're really talking about is a partnership. Maybe, Mike, you could take this one and just explain how that is evolving in the jobs where integrators are involved with the lighting fixtures in a more new construction scenario, where they're building partnerships and they're doing the integrators doing the specification, but the electrician's still going to do the wiring and the installation, perhaps. Like, can you talk about how those different roles are changing?
Yeah. So there's really an opportunity to make this win-win for all the traditional influencers in a lighting decision on a luxury residential project. So electricians are certainly the biggest opportunity for conflict, but we've been kind of blown away at how little conflict there's been, and it's actually generating more referrals than it is creating issues. So if you look at an electrician's business model, their primary profit center is labor. Oftentimes when you do a proper design, you're expanding the scope of the project, which typically means more wiring, more holes, and more revenue for their primary profit center. Now, you go to the material itself, we encourage all of our dealer partners to put in a handling fee for the material that is in line with what they would typically see for making money off materials as well. So the client really, to be able to educate them on why lighting is important, they're going to get a much better end result. And that's where the dealer comes in. They're also going to make sure that compatibility with controls is done proactively instead of after the fact, and making sure that the client's paid for a nice control system and these beautiful fixtures, and that they don't have any flickering issues or dimming compatibility issues that I think any integrator that's had any time in this space has experienced. And then even from a builder and the design community, it's all about enhancing the things that architects and designers put a lot of time and effort into realizing in a space. So you can actually light humble materials and make it look a lot better with quality lighting than having great materials lit well with poor lighting. So being able to have that conversation, say, let's break out your material board and let's light it up. And what color temperature do you like? They'll have opinions on the trim finish as well, but there's really ways to enhance the space. Architectural details, the same thing. And then from a builder perspective, they are not getting callbacks about compatibility. They're not having issues with warranty if you're specifying it properly. And we're really creating an entire experience. So if a dealer goes into a project and says they're going to handle, again, that design and specification piece, and then project management and commissioning at the end, and they're broadening that scope beyond just, hey, we do fixtures as a bolt-on. It's no, we manage that entire lighting experience in the home. That's how dealers are going to market, is addressing each of those influencers and really telling that broader story.
And Charlie, from a control standpoint with Legrand and with Vantage, specifically within Legrand family, when I met with your team at CEDIA Expo in the fall, we talked about how much work Vantage had put into trying to be a good control partner with all of these different fixture brands, so that the lighting experience was even throughout a home, even if you weren't using the exact same fixture brands for different rooms or parts of rooms. Can you speak on a little bit about that process and what you're trying to achieve there? And I remember a kit that you had there at the show that was kind of showing all the integration and the ability to make everything look like it all fits together as one big family.
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges today from a control standpoint with a lot of the fixtures, and I'll speak specifically about tunable fixtures. From a commissioning or a programming standpoint, a lot of the work that the dealer has to do is trial and error. So, for example, if you wanted to have a fixture at 3,500K, for example, the dealer's role, when they're programming that, is to figure out, okay, I need to send the cool LED to a specific level. I need to send the warm LED to a specific level. And they need to do that for every single fixture manufacturer and type. So what we've done is we've got a team of folks at the office that basically take all these fixtures, we bring them in-house. We've got some fancy test equipment, and what they do is build profiles. So instead of having to worry about, these are the different settings for the fixture, it's send the fixture to 3,500K, and our built-in software knows what it needs to do in order to achieve that. So it's really been received well. We had a couple of fixtures from DMF at the show Lightapalooza, and we were showing how we were doing that. So like I said, the reception has been really favorable, and we're continuing to add new profiles to the fixture weekly.
And I guess I want to talk about protocols, but before we get into that, just one last thing about the idea of specifying for integrators. Maybe Mike could give me a little bit better idea on how you've simplified things for integrators, because I know in the old days that were not that long ago, you would be a commercial lighting specifier. You would go in and there was the nomenclature for products was really long numbers and letters and things that weren't easy to decipher, I guess, from what I've heard. And you kind of had to build your fixtures like part by part. And as far as I understand, you've been trying to make that a lot easier for the integration community to be able to specify without having to become educated in a whole new language. Is that true? Have you tried to do that? Is it easier these days to order fixtures within the custom integration channel?
Yeah, so we're notorious as an industry for having like encyclopedias of part codes, and if you get one digit wrong, it can be a problem. So we recognize that, and we have a couple of advantages on that front. First off, we're committed to modular as just a basic tenet of every product that we bring out. So what that means is we can do a lot of different things with a limited amount of SKUs. So it just pares down the number of SKUs that you're dealing with in the first place. So that's been a winning strategy for us, is just the simplicity of the product as a whole. And then from the physical ordering process, we've also built out a portal where you're able to make your selections, and then it auto builds out your part codes and your pricing, and you can order directly from there. So that ease of specification has been a big benefit. But it also gives you flexibility, because everyone's been on jobs where things change from rough to finish, whether it's a condition on site or there's been a design change. And to be able to have the flexibility to pivot and do things and limit your labor and material costs in order to achieve that has been another thing that really helps out and has kind of removed one of those barriers to entry for an integrator that's considering getting into the category.
Okay, so that's great, and I'm really hopeful that the industry won't be intimidated by the category for the things that used to intimidate them. But the one thing that kind of still is out there that Charlie brought up to me when we were at Lightapalooza is the idea of these control protocols that were, at least one of them, I believe DMX was created for the theatrical lighting space, and then applied to businesses, to commercial facilities and homes. But then you've got Dolly, and then of course you've got the traditional phase control dimming that we're more used to. Can we open the conversation? I'll let Charlie start it, because you brought it up to me at the Lightapalooza and thought it would be good to make sure everyone understood what these protocols do, when they're used, not to be intimidated by them, but also know what you've got to learn about them. What's a good place to start with that, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, I think, in general, we're using 4 different types of dimming today. There's the standard, like you said, phase control dimming, either forward or reverse. We've got 0 to 10 volt control that's been around for a really long time. DMX has been around for a really long time. And actually, Dolly's been around for a really long time as well. It's just not very well adopted here in the US, but I think the writing is on the wall, and we all see that it's coming. And what's interesting is, when you look at lighting control and some of these technologies, a lot of this stuff starts in Europe, and somehow it shows up here in the US years later. So here we are again, seeing Dolly, starting to pick up speed. I know Mike's team is working on fixtures. Dolly 2.0 is the latest iteration, and there's a number of companies now that are working on fixtures, and now it's kind of a race for the controls companies, to make sure that we've got controls in place to be able to control these fixtures.
Well, I've heard that traditional phase control dimming is going to go away someday, and you even have David Weinstein at Lightapalooza kind of leaning into it, as Lutron, whose business has really been very much focused on traditional phase control dimming. And obviously they acquired Ketra, and that's a different animal, but he had a tombstone for lighting control up on a slide. Apparently I didn't attend that session, but we're not seeing the end of that like anytime soon, the traditional style of dimming. It's going to be a process, and there's reasons for using one over another. Mike, when is Dolly a good fit? And when you're talking about your products?
Yeah, so we see the move to digital. A couple things. I mean, let's back up a little bit and say that the vast majority of what we sell today is phase control, because it's a familiar architecture. Electricians are familiar with deploying lighting control systems with phase control. But as we get into digital, there's a few things that are really beneficial. With Dolly specifically, it's very easy to wire. There's some technical benefits to the deployment. But basically, you're not having to do a home run for every single switch leg. You can daisy chain up to 64 fixtures on a single controller, so you're reducing the amount of lighting control hardware wherever you're landing that as one piece. But it also unlocks some really cool things like tunable white and also soft zoning. So once you have that loop established, each fixture gets an IP address, and you can really set it up and group fixtures however you'd like. So just from a ability to fine tune scenes and fine tune certain environments, both in intensity and control and grouping, digital just unlocks a lot of flexibility that wouldn't be there otherwise. And furthermore, getting into Dolly is that it's an open protocol. So at DMF, we don't do every category. There's other fixture manufacturers that are very complementary. And it's also an open protocol that every controls manufacturer can adopt. So what's great about the industry as a whole, kind of leaning into Dolly 2, is that the design community and the integrator community are really going to have a lot of options as far as providing the best solutions for their clients. And it's up to us as manufacturers to make sure that we're collaborating with folks like Vantage to make sure that when they do pick their system and pick their preferred fixture manufacturer, that we're able to provide a great experience, not only for the client, but also in ease of deployment and ease of programming and installation.
And Charlie, what are you seeing in terms of confusion or challenges there with the different protocols being introduced into the CI channel?
Yeah, I think where we're at today is, not every fixture supports, or every fixture manufacturer, like Mike was saying, supports all the different technologies. So, I think the challenge from an integration standpoint is you can be on a project and you could have some fixtures that are phase control, some are 0 to 10, some are DMX, and some are dolly. So you could have 4 different types of technologies being used. And I think it's, from a specification standpoint, maybe there's a lighting designer and they're using what they're familiar with. So it's good for the integrator to kind of look at, if there is a lighting designer, what's specified, if they're doing the lighting design, trying to make sure that the controls and the control technology matches up with the fixtures that are being specified.
Well, I think from my understanding, we're just getting started with all of this, and you can go to a Lightapalooza and be surrounded by a lot of like-minded individuals, and some who have been doing this for a while. But you look at the grand scheme and the size of our industry, and there's a lot who just are getting started. And I think we've kind of covered a lot of those basics. Anything, Mike, that we haven't touched on that would be important for either some veteran lighting installer specification experts in the CI channel should know, or those who are just getting started that we haven't touched on?
No, I mean, what I would say is, again, that value proposition of controlling the experience is just native to what integrators do. And as fixtures and controls continue to be more integrated and there's more technology behind them, there's really a huge opportunity to be the expert and be able to execute those projects. So I just see the future leaning more and more on the integrator community, and we're doing our best to make sure that we're collaborating with other folks and make sure that we put the tools in place to help integrators be successful. But I think it's very apparent that lighting is here for the industry. I don't think it's going anywhere. If you're not doing it today, get with your local reps, get with your buying groups, or talk to your peers about how to be successful in it. And there's a great network that wasn't there 5 years ago to help make sure that you're successful.
And Charlie, any closing comments about the category as you look at it from the control side?
No, I think, going back to what we talked about before, seeing the evolution of lighting control, shading, and now fixtures, I think, for an integrator, I think the important thing is to not be afraid of it. Maybe you don't have the expertise in-house today, but, just remember that you didn't have the expertise in-house when lighting control started. You didn't have the expertise in-house when shading started. You had mentioned David at Light Can Help You. Partner up with somebody that can do it for you, learn, and then, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, you can bring that expertise in-house, and provide that end-to-end solution. But, I would absolutely go out there and sell the projects. And, the worst thing that can happen is the customer says, yeah, I'm interested. And now you need to figure out how to do it. Right.
Right. There you go. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time out today and sharing your insights. And I think this is a very important category. I look forward to seeing it evolve and grow. And I think the efforts that both of your companies are doing are very helpful. And we will continue to cover and probably have you back on to talk more as things change. So thanks for your time today.
Yep,
Thank you.
Charlie Derk is Vice President of Strategy for Building Control Systems at Legrand. You can learn more about Legrand's Vantage brand at www.legrand.us/Vantage. Mike Libman is the National Sales Director at DMF Lighting. You can learn more about DMF's custom integration lines at dmfluxury.com. That wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com if you're looking to get professional production help on your own podcast at an affordable rate. If you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Friday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk. Lighting specialist to Residential Tech Talk.
Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.